Hi guys, what's up? My name is David and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I would like to talk about, well, my username basically, and what being queer and being pagan have to do with each other, like similarities, why someone might identify this way, things like that. So if you're interested in learning more about queerness and paganism, then stick around. So first, before I say anything, I would like to point out that I am queer and I call myself a pagan, so I'm coming from that point of view, but I am also a student of Scandinavian studies, so I'm well versed in like pre-Christian Old Norse mythology and religious studies in general, so I'm not just taking this from nowhere. I have a background in stuff like this. I mean, of course, you're welcome to Google everything yourself, but like, gotta pat myself on the back. So I'm just gonna start by giving, well, a definition of what queer and pagan means. So if we just type into Google queer definition, you will get a lot of definitions because it's quite a vague term. And it's generally used for people who are neither heterosexual nor cisgender, so people who fall outside of the established gender and sexuality binary. It was first used from the 19th century as a slur against LGBTQ people, but in the 1980s it started being reclaimed as a sort of radical alternative to more gentle terms like gay and LGBTQ, things like that. The word itself first had a different meaning. It just meant like weird, quirky, but it started being used actively against queer people. So this is a reclaimed term, but it's still being used as a slur. I don't think it's being used as often. Usually when I see the word queer, it's in a positive meaning of it. And, well, that's how I use it. I like the vagueness of the term, because when you tell someone you are queer, it's a very vague term, and I'm not really saying anything to anyone because it still doesn't tell them what my gender is, what my sexuality is, but that's like the whole point. The whole point of the word queer is like anti-establishment. I am not fully on the gender binary, I am not heterosexual, so I am queer. So yeah, that's the definition. Now if we go on to paganism, then there is also multiple definitions. So like a pagan is basically someone who holds other beliefs than the big three Abrahamic religions, so Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, but it started being used by Christians in the late Roman Empire, like right at the end of it in the 4th century, and it was used to signify people who were not Christians, who were polytheistic, so believed in multiple gods. Now, obviously, it wasn't a good thing according to Christians, and it still isn't, to be pagan, so you could say that it was also used as a slur, so to speak. But since the 19th century, it is starting to be reclaimed as well by people who have an interest in like ancient religions and started to self-identify as pagans. And positive self-identification with paganism has often been combined with criticism of Christianity and organized religion in general. So paganism is also kind of like a protest against established religions like Christianity. When it comes to modern paganism, there is not like one clear definition because it really depends on the place, the community, what you do with it, there's not one set of rules to tell someone what a pagan is, because it's not an organized religion like Christianity. So, from what I've just said about both queerness and paganism, you can see that there's some overlap on how these concepts are being used by people who identify with them, people who don't identify with them. So both being queer and being a pagan is a form of like anti-establishment. Like, you don't have to be politically active to call yourself either queer or pagan, but you're identity is being politicized anyway. If you look at what's happening to LGBTQ people in America right now, or in African countries like Uganda, even if you personally don't want to be involved in politics, your identity is still being used as an argument in politics. And the same with paganism, although now we don't have many theocracies in the world anymore, especially like not Christian ones, but Christianity is still deeply embedded in Western culture. I am not going to speak about cultures that I am not familiar with, that I do not come from. I am European. I belong to the Western world. So, like, if you want to hear about, like, queerness and paganism from an even deeper, like, post-colonial perspective, I would suggest listening to a queer person of color, because their experience is completely different than mine, because although I am trans, I am a white guy. So I'm just speaking on what I feel comfortable speaking about. As I've said, both queerness and paganism are basically like kind of radical anti-establishment movements, because they go against established norms of the gender binary, the heteronormativity, religion, which are also linked to each other, because the gender binary, like male, female, is also a very monotheistic Christian thing. I'm not saying that this gender binary does not exist in other religions, other cultures, but it is very much implemented by the church. People who are transphobic, homophobic, tend to be religious Christians. Of course, not all Christians are transphobic, and not all transphobes are Christians, but still. So if we look at like other cultures that have been more than two genders, or like completely different ideas about gender than we have here, and with the spread of Christianity, with colonization and things like that, it has spread around the world, but it still exists in some form in other cultures that have not been impacted as much by Christianity as Europe has been. Although I wouldn't say that queer identities came to Europe from outside of Europe. I think they were definitely here all along, but because of exchange of information, exchange of cultures, we have definitely come to see that non-heterosexual, non-cisgender people have been existing in other cultures as well, and that it's possible in the West too. And of course, all the sources we have about pre-Christian religion come from Christian writers, because if there's one thing about Christianity, it's that it introduced a set system of alphabet writing, teaching in a lot of places. You could say that that is a good thing, or you could say that it's not, because we are accustomed to thinking about knowledge as something that you read or something that you hear in school, whereas cultures before Christianity used to be oral, so stories were told from one generation to another, and I guess that made people much smarter than they are now, because they had no place to store knowledge other than in their brain. And, as I said, I am jumping from topic to topic, so I'm so sorry. But I study Scandinavian studies, and right now I have a subject about like Viking culture, and we are talking about Norse mythology, things like that. And we have to know that what we know about Norse mythology comes from Christian writers after the Viking Age, who wrote what they supposedly knew about pre-Christian beliefs. And we will never know if they actually wrote what happened, or if they wrote some kind of romanticized view of what pre-Christian religion used to be. So in modern paganism, we are usually like basing our beliefs or our rituals, our traditions on things that might never have happened. And that's okay, because modern paganism doesn't have to be historically accurate. It's also a fight against Christianity. But being not Christian right now is completely different than being not Christian before Christianity. Because before then, there was nothing to be against. And now, a lot of us who identify as like modern pagans come from a Christian background. Like, I was raised going to church, I am baptized, I had my communion. That didn't really impact who I am right now because I never believed in the Christian God. But it still shows how Christianity is deeply embedded in Western culture. I honestly don't know what came first for me, if it was being interested in like pagan stuff or being interested in queer stuff, but I definitely think it goes hand in hand. And if you're against like the established social norms, gender roles, you're like basically immediately also against organized religion, against capitalism, things like that. So both paganism and queerness tend to be like radical leftist things. Of course, there are non-leftist queer people and non-leftists pagans. I think the last one is pretty obvious, that there are a lot of right-wing pagan organizations that see Christianity as this like non-Western thing that invaded Europe and made it unpure and things like that, but that is at all not where I'm coming from, and I do not like those people. I stay away from them, and I would suggest you to do the same. So at least in my life, being queer and being pagan have been linked together in many ways. I often think about it myself, like how this happened, how I have come to think that way. I definitely think that seeing other people like me on like media, stuff like that, has definitely helped me realize who I am. So I'm trying to be here for other people as well, to see that this right here exists, because representation is very important, and I think there's just not enough LGBTQ people that also happen to be pagans on the internet. So I'm here for all of you who need someone to, well, to see. And at the end, I just want to give a disclaimer that there is not one way to be queer, there's not one way to be pagan, and being pagan does not mean that you actually like believe in the existence of gods or like other entities that are not Christian. It is also like a very cultural thing. It's like practicing rituals, looking at the old religions and basically like picking out what you would like to use in your modern daily life from them, like whether it's like a moral codex, whether it's being closer to nature, to your community, music, dance, things like that. It's all part of paganism and it's different for everyone. Someone might believe in spirits, gods, things like that. Others might be skeptical. I tend to describe myself as a polytheistic agnost, which means like I don't really believe in anything, but if something were to exist, it would be more logical that there were multiple gods rather than one. But yeah, you don't have to believe anything to be pagan, and you don't have to fully understand your own identity to be queer, because if you know that you are not heterosexual, not cisgender, then you may call yourself queer. I think people should be able to identify themselves with whatever they want, as long as it's not like appropriating anything. So I think I'm gonna end it on this note because I have been going on for a while. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.